where effort is quietly misplaced. Consider this carefully before anything else. You believe the problem is a lack of control. That if you could manage people better, plan outcomes more precisely, or anticipate disruptions earlier, your life would feel steadier. This assumption is rarely examined. And because it goes unexamined, it quietly directs your effort in the wrong direction. Events themselves are neutral. A delay has no insult in it. A comment has no inherent threat. A change in plans carries no judgment of you. Disturbance appears only after the mind interprets what happens and decides what it means. This is not a comforting claim. It removes the option of blaming circumstances. It places responsibility exactly where it belongs. You do not suffer because events are chaotic. You suffer because you issue rapid judgments about what events say about you, about fairness, about loss, about disrespect. These judgments feel automatic, but they are not imposed by the world. They are supplied by you, often without review. This is why the pursuit of control fails. It aims outward, toward people and outcomes that do not belong to you. Meanwhile, the source of disturbance remains untouched. More control only creates more friction. Fewer judgments create space. Stoic discipline does not promise ease. It offers clarity. It asks you to stop negotiating with what is not yours and to examine the single faculty that is. Responsibility cannot be outsourced here. If disturbance arises from judgment, then judgment is where practice must begin. Hold this distinction, where authority quietly ends. Before discussing discipline, ownership must be precise. Most effort is wasted because authority is misassigned. You act as if responsibility extends into places where it does not belong, and then you are surprised by fatigue, irritation, and resentment. The error is subtle. It does not feel like confusion. It feels like seriousness, vigilance, even care. But seriousness applied to the wrong domain becomes strain. What belongs to you is limited and exact. Your judgments, your intentions, your choices, your willingness to assent or refuse assent to what appears in your mind. These are not shared. They are not negotiable. They are not influenced by consensus or resistance unless you allow them to be. What does not belong to you is equally clear, though rarely accepted. Outcomes. The behavior of others. Timing. Recognition. Reputation. Whether plans unfold smoothly. Whether someone understands you correctly. Whether effort is rewarded in proportion to intention. These things interact with your life, but they are not under your command. Confusion arises when these two domains are blended. You attempt to manage outcomes with the same authority you possess over judgment. When the outcome resists, as it inevitably will, you experience frustration. Not because something has gone wrong, but because you were operating under a false assumption about ownership. Consider a simple example. You prepare carefully for a conversation. You choose your words with care. You remain measured. The other person responds defensively. At this point, disturbance usually enters. Not because of their response, but because of the hidden belief that preparation should guarantee receptivity. That belief was never justified. You controlled your intention. You did not control their reaction. Or consider delay. You plan a day. An interruption appears. Irritation follows. The irritation does not come from the interruption. It comes from the judgment that your schedule was owed compliance by reality. That judgment was never grounded in authority. Stoic discipline begins with refusing to issue commands where you have no jurisdiction. This is not passivity. It is accuracy. When authority is misplaced, effort multiplies without effect. When authority is precise, effort becomes lighter, not because life cooperates, but because resistance is no longer personal. You may notice an internal objection here. If outcomes are not yours, why act at all? This question assumes that action requires control. It does not. Action requires intention. The Stoic does not withdraw from effort. He withdraws from entitlement to results. He acts fully, then releases the outcome as something external. This distinction is uncomfortable because it removes familiar narratives. You cannot claim that someone made you angry. You cannot insist that circumstances took your peace. You cannot postpone responsibility until conditions improve. None of that survives examination once authority is properly assigned. The relief that follows this clarity is not emotional comfort. It is reduction of error. When you stop trying to govern what is not yours, attention returns to what is. Judgment becomes visible. Choice becomes immediate. Responsibility becomes unavoidable. This boundary is not a moral idea. It is an operational one. If you ignore it, discipline turns into force. You push harder. You control more. You tighten. And still disturbance returns, because its source has not been addressed. If you respect this boundary, something shifts. You still plan. You still speak. You still act. But you no longer demand guarantees from the world. You no longer confuse effort with entitlement. You no longer mistake vigilance for authority. This explains where effort is misplaced, but not yet how disturbance takes hold, the point where agreement occurs. Now we look at what actually creates disturbance. What happens to you first is an impression, a sound, a message, a facial expression, a delay. These arrive without asking permission. They are automatic. The body reacts. The mind registers. This is not failure. It is mechanical. Disturbance does not occur at this stage. The crucial moment comes next. The mind interprets the impression and issues a verdict. This is disrespect. This is unfair. This means I am being ignored. This step is often invisible because it happens quickly, but it is decisive. The Stoics called this moment assent, agreement, consent. Impressions are unavoidable. Assent is not. Between what appears and what you conclude, there is a pause. It may be brief. It may feel insignificant. But it is the only point at which freedom operates. Once assent is given, emotion follows as consequence, not cause. Anger does not arrive on its own. It is summoned by judgment. Consider criticism. Someone remarks on your work. The impression is a sound, a sentence. Neutral. Almost immediately, the mind adds, "This threatens my standing." Or "This proves incompetence." The discomfort that follows feels imposed, but it is the result of agreement with a specific interpretation. Had the mind withheld assent, the sound would have passed as information. Or consider waiting. You are delayed. The impression is time passing. The mind adds, "This should not be happening." Irritation follows. Not because of time, but because of the claim embedded in the judgment. Time never promised obedience. It is important to be precise here. Stoic discipline does not deny feeling. A tightening in the chest may appear. Heat may rise. These are impressions at the level of the body. They do not yet dictate behavior. What determines behavior is whether the mind endorses the story attached to the sensation. Many people confuse noticing a reaction with agreeing to it. They say, "I couldn't help it." But what they mean is, "I did not pause." The pause is not dramatic. It is not philosophical. It is simply the refusal to rush into conclusion. This is why fewer judgments matter more than greater control. Control aims to rearrange impressions. Fewer judgments change the relationship to them. When assent is delayed, disturbance weakens. When assent is examined, disturbance dissolves or never forms. You may notice resistance here. The mind argues that judgments are obvious, that conclusions are self-evident. They are not. They are habits. Repeated agreements that have never been questioned. What feels immediate is often rehearsed. The practice begins by making assent visible. When something unsettles you, ask only one question: what judgment am I agreeing to right now? Not whether it is justified. Not whether others would agree. Simply identify it. The act of identification creates space. This space is not emotional relief. It is clarity. In that clarity, you regain choice. You may still choose the same judgment. But now it is chosen, not automatic. Responsibility returns to where it belongs. Understanding this mechanism does not create discipline. Insight alone does not interrupt habit. But without this clarity, discipline is impossible, because effort is aimed at the wrong moment. Understanding the mechanism is not enough. It must be trained. What discipline actually trains? This is where most people misunderstand discipline. Discipline is usually imagined as force. Pushing through resistance. Suppressing reaction. Enduring discomfort until it breaks. This image is admired, but it is inaccurate. Force addresses symptoms. Discipline addresses the mechanism. Stoic discipline trains attention, not endurance. What must be trained is the moment of assent. Not once, but repeatedly. Not under ideal conditions, but under ordinary pressure. Training does not aim to eliminate impressions. It aims to slow agreement. The mind is taught to wait. This is why willpower fails. Willpower appears only after judgment has already been issued. At that point, the verdict is in place, and effort turns into internal conflict. You argue with yourself. You resist what you have already endorsed. This feels exhausting because it is. Training works earlier. Ascesis, in the Stoic sense, is not punishment. It is rehearsal. You practice noticing impressions without immediately concluding what they mean. You practice identifying judgments before they harden. You practice pausing when the urge to react feels justified. This training does not remove emotion. It changes the sequence. Feeling may still arise. Heat may still appear. But it does not automatically convert into action or narrative. The gap between sensation and story widens. In that gap, choice lives. Repetition matters more than intensity. A single heroic effort changes nothing. What matters is consistency in small moments. The discipline is built when the stakes are low, so that it holds when they are not. This is why Stoic practice avoids dramatic tests. You do not need crises to train judgment. You need interruptions. Minor frustrations. Ordinary slights. These are sufficient. They appear daily. They are predictable. They are ideal training ground. Notice how quickly the mind wants to label. This is annoying. This is unacceptable. This shouldn't happen. Discipline does not argue with these labels. It delays them. It treats them as proposals, not conclusions. At first, this feels unnatural. The mind is accustomed to speed. It equates immediacy with intelligence. Slowing down can feel like weakness. It is not. It is accuracy. A rushed judgment is not a sharp one. You may also notice another error. People attempt to use discipline to suppress reaction entirely. They aim to feel nothing. This is not Stoic. It is brittle. Suppression requires constant force and eventually fails. When it fails, reaction returns stronger, now justified by the effort spent resisting it. Stoic discipline allows reaction to appear without granting it authority. You do not deny sensation. You deny it the power to issue commands. This distinction is crucial. Training also requires acceptance of imperfection. You will notice judgments after they have already taken hold. You will catch yourself mid-reaction. This is not failure. This is information. The practice does not demand immediacy. It demands honesty. Each time you recognize a judgment, even late, you weaken its future authority. Each time you pause, even briefly, you strengthen the habit of restraint. The mind learns what you consistently reward with attention. Discipline, then, is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is the repeated refusal to rush into agreement. It is the willingness to see judgment as optional, even when it feels obvious. When this training is misunderstood, people either abandon it or turn it into self-punishment. Both miss the point. The aim is not to become rigid. The aim is to become precise. Precision reduces friction. Fewer false judgments mean fewer unnecessary reactions. Life does not become smooth. But the mind stops adding resistance where none is required. This training remains abstract unless it appears in daily life, where practice enters the day. This practice is proven in ordinary moments. Philosophy fails when it remains abstract. Stoic discipline works only when it enters the day quietly, without ceremony, without ideal conditions. The mind is not trained in isolation. It is trained in traffic, in conversation, in delay, in routine friction. The first practice is anticipation, but not anxiety. Each day will present interruptions. This is not pessimism. It is accuracy. When you expect convenience, every inconvenience feels like an offense. When you expect friction, its arrival does not carry insult. You are not rehearsing distress. You are removing surprise. This anticipation is brief and neutral. There will be delays. People will misunderstand. Plans will shift. Nothing more is required. You are not predicting outcomes. You are preparing judgment. When an impression arrives that you already accounted for, the urge to issue a dramatic verdict weakens. The second practice is the pause before assent. This is the central discipline. When something unsettles you, do not rush to interpretation. One breath is enough. Not to calm yourself. Not to feel better. Simply to interrupt speed. In that breath, ask only, what am I about to agree to? You are not deciding yet. You are noticing. This question alone often dissolves the urgency of reaction. The mind realizes it is being observed. Habit loses momentum when it is seen. Sometimes the judgment will still appear compelling. You may still assent. That is allowed. Discipline is not refusal at all costs. It is choice made visible. Even when you choose poorly, choosing consciously weakens automatic patterns. The third practice is evening review, without praise or guilt. At the end of the day, recall a few moments where judgment appeared. Not to congratulate restraint. Not to condemn reaction. Simply to observe. Here I rushed. Here I paused. Here I added unnecessary meaning. Guilt is itself an unexamined judgment. It adds another layer of disturbance and disguises itself as responsibility. Responsibility does not require self-attack. It requires clarity. Review is diagnostic, not moral. Notice patterns, not failures. You may see that certain situations consistently trigger haste. Certain people. Certain times of day. This information is valuable. It allows tomorrow's anticipation to be precise rather than vague. These practices are intentionally modest. They do not rely on motivation. They do not require inspiration. They function even when energy is low. This is important. Discipline that depends on mood is not discipline. You may be tempted to escalate. To add more techniques. To demand faster results. Resist this. Escalation is another form of impatience. The work here is subtractive. Fewer judgments. Shorter stories. Less commentary. It is also important to accept uneven progress. Some days the pause will be clear. Other days it will be missed entirely. This does not invalidate the practice. The mind is not trained in a straight line. Consistency matters more than outcome. Do not turn these practices into performance. They are private. They do not require demonstration. The goal is not to appear calm, but to be accurate. External composure without internal clarity is brittle. Over time, something shifts. Impressions still arrive. Pressure still exists. But the mind no longer treats every sensation as a command. Judgment slows. Reaction loses authority. This is not suppression. It is order. When this practice becomes stable, a different kind of freedom appears. What freedom remains intact? Freedom is often misunderstood. Many imagine freedom as ease, as the absence of friction, as life arranging itself according to preference. This expectation quietly recreates the same error as control. It ties freedom to conditions that do not belong to you. When those conditions shift, freedom appears lost. Stoic freedom is different. It does not depend on comfort. It does not require cooperation from circumstances. It does not increase when life becomes smoother. It remains intact precisely because it is located elsewhere. What changes with discipline is not the world, but where authority resides. Life does not become easier. People still disappoint. Plans still fail. Bodies still tire. Time still moves without regard for desire. None of this is altered by Stoic practice. What is altered is the point of command. Authority returns inward. When judgment slows, reaction loosens. When reaction loosens, compulsion weakens. You may still feel pressure, but you are no longer forced to convert pressure into narrative. You may still experience discomfort, but you are not required to treat it as injustice or threat. This distinction matters. Comfort is fragile. It depends on stability, predictability, and favorable conditions. Remove any one of these and comfort collapses. Freedom does not. Freedom survives instability because it is not built on it. Freedom, in this sense, is the ability to respond without being dragged, to choose without being rushed, to act without demanding that action guarantee a result. It is modest. It is durable. You may notice that this freedom feels quieter than expected. There is no surge, no triumph, no sense of having arrived. That expectation belongs to achievement, not maintenance. Stoic freedom is maintained, not attained once and for all. This is why it must be practiced continuously. Each judgment examined preserves it. Each pause protects it. Each refusal to escalate preserves it. The moment you stop practicing, authority drifts outward again, and freedom becomes conditional. It is also important to see what this freedom does not provide. It does not shield you from loss. It does not spare you from effort. It does not make you indifferent to what matters. It allows you to engage fully without being owned by outcome. You still care. You still prefer certain results. The difference is that preference no longer issues commands. You can pursue what you value without collapsing when it resists. This is not detachment from life. It is detachment from entitlement. From the outside, this freedom may look like restraint. From the inside, it feels like space. The space to respond deliberately. The space to accept what appears without adding unnecessary meaning. The space to act without bargaining for guarantees. Nothing outside you must change for this to begin. No permission is required. No conditions must improve. The work remains the same in ease and in difficulty. This is why it is reliable. You may also notice a reduction in urgency. Many reactions are driven by the belief that something must be resolved immediately. When judgment is delayed, urgency often reveals itself as assumption rather than necessity. Problems remain, but panic loses relevance. This freedom does not make you passive. It makes your action cleaner. When reaction is removed, intention stands alone. Action becomes simpler, not because it is effortless, but because it is no longer crowded by internal resistance. There is a quiet confidence that emerges here. Not confidence in outcome, but confidence in response. You know where your responsibility ends and where it does not. You no longer chase control to feel secure. You rely on clarity. This is not a state to reach. It is a position to maintain. It requires vigilance, not against the world, but against haste within the mind. It is renewed each time you choose accuracy over speed. Nothing more needs to be added. What responsibility cannot be given away? This ends where responsibility begins. You have followed a single thread throughout this reflection. Disturbance does not come from events, but from the judgments you place upon them. Nothing here requires escalation. Nothing requires force. What is required is accuracy, practiced repeatedly. You do not need more control. Control reaches outward and inevitably fails. What you need is fewer judgments issued in haste, fewer conclusions accepted without review. This responsibility cannot be transferred to circumstances, to other people, or to time. It rests entirely with you. Imperfection does not disqualify the work. You will judge too quickly. You will react before noticing. You will recognize the error after the fact. None of this invalidates the practice. Responsibility does not mean flawlessness. It means refusal to excuse confusion once it is seen. The Stoic position is demanding precisely because it removes alibis. No one else is required to change for clarity to be maintained. No outcome needs to cooperate. The world is allowed to remain unstable. Your task is simpler and more difficult, to govern assent. When you fail, return to the pause. When you succeed, do not congratulate yourself. Both reactions distract from the same work. What matters is consistency, not outcome. You are not asked to become detached from life. You are asked to stop adding unnecessary meaning to what appears. This alone reduces disturbance more reliably than any attempt at control. The work is quiet. It attracts no attention. It produces no signal. But it preserves something essential, the ability to respond deliberately, without being owned by reaction. That is the discipline. And it is yours. Practice this today in something small.